Hey there, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of The Mystic Path. This is our fifth episode for this year that we're actually been recording because I started this last year and restarted it this year. But the topic today, I think you're going to really enjoy. So I'm going to add the PowerPoint to the stage. But it's the Mystic Path, the Holy Grail, the quest for the true self. And so what I look for is the symbolism in ancient texts, whether it be history or spiritual or philosophy or poetry or whatever. My personal belief is that they use symbols because symbols carry on beyond language. And we'll talk about that in just a little bit. But this, I'm going to kind of jump into this because I think that that's where we should go right now. So, but our journey so far, this is the fifth episode we've done this year, was I started off at the Rainbow Bridge. And then I talked about the wrestle before the dawn, the river never runs dry, and the garden before the fall. And now we're in the Holy Grail. If you want to watch these previous episodes, they're on my YouTube channel, and that's Lamplight Group. And you'll be able to find that it's titled, it's Lamplight Group, and then you'll find Jeremy E. McDonald. You'll be able to find me, and there's a JM logo on the logo for the channel. So anyways, kind of going in, I'll just ask her a question. Obviously, you're not going to be able to know it exactly. You're not going to be able to tell me unless you put it in the chat. What comes to mind when you hear the words the Holy Grail? What comes to mind when you think of that? And why has the story survived for nearly 1,000 years? Kind of makes you wonder. And so it has several iterations of it. So it's just one of those things, but we're going to kind of dive into that here in this episode. So let me ask you another question. What if the Holy Grail has always reflected who we've always been? We're always looking for this cup. But what if the Holy Grail is something different? And so when we're kind of jumping into this, why does this story keep appearing throughout history? So why do civilizations separated by oceans and centuries keep telling stories about these things, sacred vessels like the Holy Grail, living water, divine food, elixirs, trees of life, and transformation? So perhaps they weren't telling the same story. They weren't telling the same story. Perhaps they were asking the same question, because we get caught up in the story instead of the actual question. And that's what my actual book, The Sovereign Mindset, is about. Somebody asked me that this morning at a church I spoke at, and I basically said to them, they said, well, what is this? How do you write this? I said, it's a lot of questions. And why is there a lot of questions? Because to get you to think and to dive deeper in and have a relationship with your inner world as opposed to everything that's going on out here. And so that's the beginnings, to start asking the questions. And so perhaps they were asking the same question. And so before there was the Grail, ancient Britain, before the legend began, so we'll kind of go into this, ancient Celtic Britain had the Celtic worldview, sacred kingship, the other world, and transformation. On the Welsh underworld is talked about in the old Welsh traditions. We're going to get into that a little bit. And then we look at the King Bran the Blessed. And he's described in ancient Welsh stories. Well, what does that tell us? We talk about Bran's cauldron in these ancient Welsh stories. So people are dead when they enter this cauldron. They return, and it's called Par da Dundee. Par da Denny. I can't pronounce it. I'm really bad at that, but I love the words. So, but really the idea of this talk was to start asking the question. The dead enters, they return alive, but they can't talk. Why? Why is that? Now, a lot of this is my metaphysical interpretation of it. I go into meditation and I ask Spirit to bring me what I'm supposed to look at. And then this becomes a research project and looking at different metaphors and symbols and things throughout spiritual texts and history. And this is one of those ancient myths that's out there, Bran's cauldron. So looking beyond the words, some experiences change us so deeply, words are no longer carry them. So you come out, you're dead, you go in there, you come back, and then you're not able to say words. And this is true, because if anybody's had any type of deep spiritual experience, a lot of NDEers, they have trouble articulating what they've experienced because it's hard to put into words. And so very much like the near-death experience, when they go over to the other side, they can describe all the colors and all the things, but there's, in a sense, but they can't describe the feeling that they have had. I've tried over and over again to explain my feeling I had at the shared death experience I had back in 2012. But how can you pass along a feeling to somebody when we all have different experiences? Because they have to go through the same experience or similar experience themselves. And I'm not saying you have to go through a near-death experience or a shared death experience, but you have to go within, because you don't have to have those transcendent experiences by dying. You go within. And that's what all these texts are trying to tell us. They're trying to say, go within, go within, go within, go within, turn within. The divine is within you. The temple of God is within you. It's all trying to tell you the same things. But we're still looking for it outside of us, because all these stories have knights going out and trying to catch things and find the Holy Grail. So the first sacred vessel, it receives, it contains, it transforms, it nourishes, and it restores. Why do sacred stories begin with a vessel? Like the Holy Grail or bronze cauldron. And when you think of it, they're bringing up new life in this cauldron, so to speak. And they're going through transformation. You're being brewed into this new transformation. It's cooking within you as you're doing your inner work. And it nourishes. And then when we start to get to the point, our body goes through this transformation, much like the butterfly when it's transforming from its one state into the next. And so a lot of these stories are metaphors to teach you something, but it's when your mind awakens to you can see it. Because you might just look at it and say, oh, it's just a cauldron jar. But what happens is when you get deeper within, you start to see the symbols and metaphors that were there in the first place. And it really helps you grow. So from cauldron to cup to the human soul, the grail emerges. It starts to emerge throughout these stories. And the symbol evolution, so it goes from a cauldron, sacred cup, Holy Grail, mystical symbol, and then human soul. So many scholars see possible Celtic influences on the later Grail in literature, while also recognize the distinct Christian developments of the medieval Grail traditions. So a lot of these stories were passed down from family member to family member, from teacher to student, over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. And you had to be you had to be a student or an apprentice. We didn't have schools teaching them the same, teaching them. You were apprenticed with somebody and you learned from that. And if you got into math, you started learning math and literature and poetry, or being a blacksmith. And when you really look about it, each one is a journey. Each one of your careers is a journey to discover who you are on a deeper level. So Christianity comes to Britain, and we have the Last Supper, Joseph of Arimathea, and the crucifixion, and medieval legends, Arthurian romance. So history, what can be documented and verified, and then we have legend, what medieval stories wove together, and then we have mystical interpretation, what the symbols invites us to contemplate. And this is very careful, because we don't want to necessarily put down history, because history is what it is. And then there's legends that was passed down through stories, but then each one of us can have these experiences and see those traditions and those texts differently through a mystical interpretation. And that's typically what I do, is I look at these things and I feel them, and then I allow my inner soul, my inner self to guide me, my higher self, whatever you want to refer to it as. So Christianity comes into Britain, and it brings these new stories coming in, which is going to influence things like the Holy Grail or bronze cauldron. See, you can start to see the blending of the stories. Does that make them wrong? No. It means just like we would sit down and talk, and we have conversations and we'd brainstorm, and you'd start to see it a little differently, because you'd have a different perspective, which is leading to the same source. So that's just one of those things. So we get really tied up in who's right and who's wrong, instead of just looking at it and pondering it and giving yourself a different perception, that may be something that leads you down a new path of discovery of who you are and your relationship to the divine. So Arthur's knights, Percival and Galahad and Parsifal, these knights, found the Grail, and they're all in different legends. Well, let me ask you a question. Why do only certain knights find the Grail? Doesn't that make you want to think? So my theory is this: just like the cauldron, just like the Rainbow Bridge, just like everything else that we've discussed, the wrestle before the dawn, the Garden of Eden, all this kind of stuff. It's about the battle within. When the war inside ends, then the war outside will end. So when you've literally worked on yourself within, then clarity comes in, and you're able to allow yourself to experience the world differently because you see it differently because you've done the inner work. You're no longer reactive, you're proactive to what's happening in this world. So maybe the Grail quest it was never about defeating enemies, it was about transforming the seeker. Think about that. Maybe they didn't have to fight one battle with anybody else, but they had to fight their inner fight so that they could transform themselves into something new, a newer version of themselves, or the version of themselves that was always there. So what does that come into? They start finding humility, compassion, purity, and service and awareness. So it really starts to make you start to think, why did they use these symbols? Why didn't they just write it out and stuff like that? Well, we can see how that's worked. We've got literally texts that went from Hebrew stories and passed down probably before then to Greek and to English. And so we can see how that's going. And then other people coming, the Council of Nicaea and other things, and they had their own interpretation and made it just these books, cut out everything, other parts of it. And so, and that's for whatever reason they did it. That's a topic for another discussion. But if you start to go in there and start to think that the universal language is sacred vessels found in every tradition, it starts to tell you something. It tells you that there was, in all these stories that have parallels throughout the world, why were they there? Well, they were there because these symbols or these things can be universal. And when you start to think about that, whoever was getting downloads, so to speak, or being touched by the spirit or the divine within, they were experiencing this, and they were starting to explain it in a way where we can all go, whoa. And maybe even though we had different languages, because remember, the languages are broke up at the Tower of Babel, and then they started babbling with each other. But symbolism brings in an emotional feeling or an energetic response that helps us all relate to each other. And so then, therefore, we can awaken the consciousness in all of us through the initiates that go through their process of what? Shedding back the layers, tearing back the layers to understand who you are on a deeper, soulful level. So when we start to dive a little deeper into this and start looking at these sacred vessels around the world, we've got in the Celtic traditions, you've got the cauldrons, and this is the transformation, rebirth, and divine knowledge. It represents rebirth. So being reborn into something new. And words don't necessarily mean anything to you. It's that feeling and that energy or that source of how we flow with the universe or with the divine. In Vedic principles, you got the soma. It's a ritual drink and deity. But basically it means divine life. So divine life in that flow again with the spiritual energy and that divine energy. And then we've got the Amrita, are the nectar of immortality. So the immortality of our soul that's been here all this time. And as we start peeling back the layers and turning back inward into our soul, we start to build a better relationship with that immortal parts of ourselves, the soul. And the golden elixir for inner transformation. So we've turned lead into gold, right? And so what are we doing? That our Jesus turned water into wine. And so these are things that was telling us that there's just telling us all this stuff that we can transform ourselves from the inside and start to understand who we are on the outside. Now, sometimes it can be painful. Sometimes it can be hard because we have to let go of things that we are so attached to. And as we're letting go of things, we allow ourselves to be in the divine plan. Just because we're letting go doesn't mean it's leaving. It means it's now transmuting itself into a different state of being. And so, and the ego gets really afraid of that. It gets afraid of being lost in the shuffle, so to speak, that if you let go, that somehow it's not going to be around anymore. And that's just not true. It's just you're going to both transform your state into a new way of thinking and being. And so in Christian, we have the Grail, which is divine life. And then the Sufis, we have the cup, are the union with God. So they're all kind of telling the same or similar things. And it's trying to tell you what? It's trying to tell you that all of us are going through this journey in this human life and these spiritual beings being inside of this human body. It's the vessel that carries us and through this experience, through this world, through this third dimensional space. So these traditions are not identical, but many of them use symbolic language to explore transformation, wisdom, and human search for the divine. All of us are looking for that outside of ourselves, but it's all within. And we start going within and we start looking at what's happening within ourselves. We can start seeing that we've been cluttering up our garden, so to speak, in our inner worlds with thoughts that don't even belong to us. And when you empower yourself and you step into who you are as a divine being, then nothing will control you. And the universe will naturally manifest its way as you're walking through this labyrinth, so to speak, of life. And then you can't necessarily see everything. Your higher self will guide you and say, turn here, go forward here, that kind of stuff. And it will keep you in the path of least resistance. Now, I remember I didn't say the easiest path. I said the path of least resistance. Well, which would be the easiest path. But I'm saying you might run into challenges in your life, but it's going to take you to the life that the challenges that you need to do to let go of something or transform yourself. And those when you think about that, that's a blessing. Thank you for the blessings that you're taking me through these new opportunities to understand who I am at a deeper level, on a soulful level. And that's a blessing. So different cultures, different languages, similar questions. So, we've got all these different traditions, and this is just a few of them. But why? Why is there different languages, different cultures with similar questions? Why is that? So maybe the language of symbols is telling us, instead of teaching ideas or instead of giving doctrine of symbols or stories, maybe it's inviting us all to transformation. Maybe all of these symbols were trying to tell you that you're more than you think you are. And you allowing other people to tell you how to be, how to think, how to feel, that's the real shame there. And when another human being or another being tries to control who you are as a soul, that's incorrect. And as if we're in alignment with our soul, we're going to be in that divine flow that allows us to what? Blossom as a soul. So the alchemical grail, where a symbol becomes transformation, this whole symbol of the Holy Grail, what is this really? Well, looking at this great work, the magnum opus, from turning lead into gold, fear into love, ego into spirit, death into life. This is a symbolic language of alchemy, not literal process. So what does the great work tell us? The magnum opus matter passes through stages of dissolution, purification, and transformation. In the mystic path, we move through fear, forgetting, scarcity, separation, until we recognize our true self. So what is it? This transformation from lead into gold is transforming us into who we already are, this divine being, and it's showing us who we already are so that we can grow and manifest into the glory of who we always have been. Not the one that's pushing everything down and shame and guilt and all that other kind of stuff and of two minds and everything. You're in flow with your soul and spirit. And so that takes us down a different journey. So the blood of Christ in medieval tradition describes the Grail as receiving the blood of Christ. So many Christian mystics have understood the symbol as representing a participation in the divine life and inner transformation. Contemporary spiritual teachers sometimes use metaphors such as light or higher consciousness to describe this awakening. So you're awakening into your divine consciousness, your higher consciousness. And whether one approaches the image devotionally or symbolically, it invites reflection. It invites reflection on what it means to embody in transformed life. So one of the things I always say is your emotions as a way to start working through this, because your emotions, a lot of times, if it's fear, it's blocking us. It's helping block us from seeing all the full potential of who we already are. And we've just been convinced otherwise. We've been told, no, that's not who we are. No, that's the mere sinner. We're all that. Well, come on now. So why would this great being create something in their image, put us down here, and then torment us? That's just not a thing. And when the word sin means missing the mark, it means out of balance. It means you're you know what? Get back into balance a little bit, get back into balance and grow from them. So why a cup? Well, a cup is valuable because it is empty. If it was empty, it wasn't empty. If it was full of all your thoughts and all the busy work that you have to get done and all the things that you feel you have to do, then it couldn't be filled up with the new aspects of you. And that's one of the reasons why breathing is a really good thing. So when you do your meditation, breathe in through your nose, breathing in all the new parts of who you are, and then exhaling out and letting go of what no longer serves you. So you can empty yourself out so that you can bring it in. So as you breathe in, and then you hold it, and then you let out what no longer serves you. And then as you let it out, it pushes all that energy of what is new into your body and allows you to do what? Grow. It allows you to really manifest and transform your life into that new state of consciousness that you already are. So becoming the vessel, your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19. It says it right there. So if that's the case, if the temple is within you, then your abundance and your prosperity and your health is already there. And when you go through things in your life, when you have a health problem, when you have something that happens, it's just a way for you to look within it. It is not a punishment. Go down there and talk to it and start working with that Holy Spirit energy to start what? Transforming that energy into something different for you. So when we start to look at this and we start looking at these different symbols, this is telling us that we're becoming the new vessel, the new Holy Grail. You are the Holy Grail. You are the Holy Grail. Your whole body is carrying your soul, and we're transforming our old thoughts of limitation into the glory of who we already are. So looking at this, the mirror, and I don't know if anybody's ever done mirror work, it's a powerful thing. You go stand in front of the mirror and you just ask yourself, take me to where I need to go. And it will literally drop. And you look at yourself eye to eye and you go in there and you say, take me to where I need to go. And you'll see things pop up, all these things that you've done in your life and emotions and feelings. And then you might have to do some forgiveness work. You might have to do some healing work, but that's okay. But what if the Holy Grail has always reflected who we have always been? I've been saying this throughout this talk. We've been taught that everything is outside of ourselves when it's not necessarily true. Everything is not all outside of ourselves. We have everything that's what we need within inside of ourselves. And we are connected to consciousness. And it will guide us in the things that we have to do here in the physical world. Go to college, get this job, speak this truth, go to the doctor, go to a healer, do this. It tells us what to do and when to do it. And each time you have a new experience that helps you what? Understand who you are on a deeper level. So the journey we go through, this is the fool's journey. We go into fear, remembrance, abundance, wholeness, and then we finally reach to the true self. So each step connects to the episode that carried it. So this is new. We're going through these processes and growing and helping ourselves. So one of the lessons I want you to take from this is all these symbols from around the world, they're trying to tell you something, that you're more than you think you are, that you're greater than you think you are. And you are a beautiful being that deserves the best of everything. And when we embrace that, then when we start doing our inner work, we can start changing the dynamics of our inner world, and then we'll start changing the dynamics of our outer world. So if the Grail reflects who we have always been, who have you always been? That's the question for the week. Ask yourself that question. Who have you always been? Are you living and honoring who you are authentically? Are you living in your truth and speaking your truth? Are you taking care of yourself before you take care of others? Damien and I were just talking this morning about put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on anybody else in the airplane if the plane's crashing, because you need to be able to breathe in order to be able to put the mask or help anybody. So every culture has told us the story differently. Every symbol has pointed inward. It's all been telling us to go inward. And every seeker has walked a path, much like the knights, the Grail knights, the Arthurian knights. They had to walk a path to realize who they were, and they transformed who they were through their journey. And perhaps the greatest discovery is not that the Grail is waiting for us, but that it has always reflected who we've always been. So the Grail has never been an object to possess. It's always been a mirror reflecting who we've always been. So there you have it, folks. And so here's my website, jeremymcdonald.net. You'll be able to find anything about me there. You'll be able to find a copy of my book, The Sovereign Mindset, Unlocking Your Divine Potential. Also, my old book is on there, Peace Be Still. And so you can find out, do book sessions with me, see other things about me there. So anyways, I hope everybody loves this because I have a lot of fun putting these together. And everybody, I hope you have a blessed week. Thank you so much. Namaste. And I'm grateful to be able to be here and tell you who you are. You are an empowered being. Yeah, say it louder.